Some pretty big
Welcome
news.
back.
Thank you, mate. It's good to be back. Some big news yesterday. It'll be of little comfort to the hundreds of thousands of Australians that are still unemployed at the moment, but it is still good news in a general sense that Australia is out of recession, and we weren't really in it for that long.
We weren't, and you're right. Look, what you've got to take from yesterday's GDP, as you said, from that employment perspective, is that it's coming. You can see, don't forget, what we got yesterday was for the quarter that goes to September. So that's July, August, and September. Victoria was a big part of the reason why we didn't see a full recovery yesterday with those numbers. They were still in, pretty strong lockdowns during that period. But what you could see is that consumption was really starting. And when we talk about consumption in the GDP figure, people forget that's a lot of things. That's things like services, those services that you consume. Your mobile phone contract, for example, is a service that's under that contract idea. Education is starting to show signs it's coming back, although not as the level that they were seeing at the start of the year because international students aren't there. But even we were starting to see in that consumption number that tourism was starting to move, which is a real positive thing. And then you basically, your corner shop, your cafes, etc., did start to see decent movement. What was expected, and we did see that, is that the private investment part of GDP was all negative across the board. That's not surprising. And government spending is a major reason why we're out of contraction as well. Government spending was an absolute boom in the third quarter of this calendar year and handed that through. Just going on to your point further, though, as well there, Pete, what is clear from what's coming out of the data now is that the fourth quarter growth and first quarter of next year's growth will be very, very strong. You can actually see that in inventories. We can see that in the construction numbers, which comes out today. The trade balance numbers are telling us the same thing. And then that employment number, the labour force data over the last 2 months has been astoundingly strong, like well and truly ahead of expectations. And government requirements of JobKeeper is falling away, which means people are getting re-employed. So you are right. It still feels like a recession, but there is certainly a lot of good light on the horizon, and that employment number particularly is the one we're watching closely.
You'd have to think there'd be a bounce today as well following this Pfizer, the news that the UK is going to be rolling out the Pfizer vaccine within days.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So I agree with that. So there is no doubt what's happened in November, the fact that we got records across the whole world with regards to 1 month moves pretty much for pretty much Europe, US, and here in Australia is on the vaccine deals. Interesting, last night, the FTSE 100, which is their biggest 100 companies, most of them are international exposed, rallied 1% and then fell off on that news, which is interesting.
Yeah.
The pound was also interesting. The pound went the other direction. It went down rather than up. Well, that's what I'm actually genuinely asking the question. I'm putting my hand up and saying, I don't know. Now, maybe it's the idea of this, that what happened in November is that we know the vaccine is coming. It's not only is there going to be a vaccine, there's going to be vaccines, plural, and they will be rolled out coming probably by no later than March for most of the developed world. So maybe you could say it's priced in. Again, there is also a lot of talk around the logistics, and that maybe the idea of actually getting to a level of immunity that is actually protecting the whole population is going to take a lot longer than expected. I mean, if you look at the Pfizer vaccine, it's transported in a group of 1,000. It has to be kept at -70 degrees. And the first groups of people it's been rolled out to, economically, and maybe this is what the market's also being a bit cynical about, economically aren't that significant. It's going to be exactly who needs it, which is those in healthcare, those that are also in aged care. So that's exactly where it should go, but that doesn't mean the population gets to be freed up off the bat. So that may also explain that answer.
Hey, just finally, Evan, we've only got about 30 seconds left, but Bitcoin, it's now back in the headlines in a big way. A lot of people, most people, I would have thought, even I have no idea, I can't understand it, but it's back and it's at another record level, about 20,000 US for a Bitcoin. Why is that? People leaving the FTSE and heading back towards Bitcoin?
In 30 seconds, and I must admit, I'm going to say this very clearly, I have to turn my Twitter off, because it's not that I'm a Bitcoin skeptic, it's that Bitcoin is a speculation tool. So in simple as this, don't forget, it's a blockchain technology. Once blockchain is made, you can't add to it or take anything out. So when Bitcoin was made, there was 21 million coins originally made back in 2009. The computers that were used to do that, some of them have been lost. They reckon that there's now only about 18.5 million to 19 million coins left. And of that, about 70% of them are controlled by around about 16,000 wallets. Everybody else, therefore, is piling into 4 million coins. Simple economics, supply and demand. If you've got only 4 to 5 million coins, and there is believed to be a demand for this up towards 700 million people, maybe in as much as 1 billion users, for that many coins, you can explain why the price is there. The issue with it is you can't, people are starting to offer it as currency, inverted commas, to actually trade goods. The concern that we always have is that intraday and intra-week, the price of Bitcoin moves so fast that the service, for instance, me doing this to you right now, if I was to pay for it, which I don't, but if I was, and I was to ask it in Bitcoin, tomorrow my service could be worth 300% more, or it could be worth 300% less. That's the kind of movements per day it's doing. And therefore, as a currency, it's very hard to use as an actual fiat currency. So it's a speculation tool. It is interesting, but it's like 2015. It feels exactly like 2015, where it got up to 20,000 and then fell, basically almost 10,000 US dollars very, very quickly.